Yes, everyone, welcome back to the Irish Hotspur. It's Jack here, and I'm going to be talking about who is Vanderson, the Brazilian right-sided player who plays for Monaco at the moment. He's been connected with us by Bruno Andrade, the Portuguese journalist over in Lisbon, Portugal, and he said that Spurs have already made contacts with the player as well as with the club to replace Emerson Royale, I think for a fee around 20 million euros, because at least that's what his evaluation is over on Transfermarkt. But we're going to get straight into this video here, everybody. As always, we're going to dive into the stats. I'm always going to say don't take them, too seriously. Always take them with a pinch of salt. But we had to do some late research last night into who this guy is, and so it would be a great help if you could smash that like button, get in those comments if you feel like I'm missing anything on this player. But yeah, let's get straight into who is Vanderson. He's a Brazilian right-sided player, right wing back, right mid, right back. He's played pretty much all three positions for Monaco in the 3 seasons he's been there. He's from Rondonópolis, which is a great name of a municipality. It's in the very far western regions of Brazil. It's actually closer to Paraguay and closer to Bolivia than it even is to Rio de Janeiro. He's had 2 caps for Brazil, and that was in his 2022-23 season, where he played a lot more games than he did in this most recent season that ended. He joined Monaco from Grêmio in 2022, and last season he actually played only 20 matches. I think he missed at least 8 games or so due to injury. In this most recent season, he had 3 goals and 1 assist, though, in those 20 matches played. And in the season before that, in the 2022-23 season, he played 31 games, 1 goal and 4 assists. In his first season that he played with Monaco, he had 17 matches played, and he had 2 goals and 3 assists. So he looks, from what I can tell, to be a very technical player. I don't get to watch too much Liga, but I have seen him occasionally when they have popped up in European competitions in the last couple of years, and he looks to be a similar mold to Pedro Porro. And what I mean by that, he's a small, technical player and has a wide range of passing and looks to try to make very daring and audacious passes, from what I can tell, at least. And he's comfortable carrying it into midfield, comfortable on his left foot, even though he is a right-footed player. He actually likes to use his left foot to either dribble, take it past his man, or even to spray a pass if need be. He loves a good switch of play, which I think is rare kind of these nowadays for a right back to really go for something like that. A really audacious kind of passer. He loves a good switch of play across the field. And as well, you could say that he's just a good, technical player, and would make sense for what we're looking for if we're trying to find someone very similar to Pedro Porro, if that's what you think as well as a Spurs fan watching this, if that's what we should be going for. Or should we be going for someone maybe different to Pedro Porro, but still also can operate in that sort of inverted fullback role? Let me know in the comments what you think of that. But yeah, we're going to get into the stats, and we're going to take this thing away. And like I said earlier, everybody, please don't take stats, too seriously. I think you always have to take them with a grain of salt, especially also if you haven't even seen too much of the player like myself. I've watched him in European competitions, but I've really had to cram in my research late this Friday night. So everybody, if you can for me, smash that like button. Would be a huge help. But let's get into some of the stats here. So first, we're going to take a look at him defensively. Straight off the bat, you can tell that he's a very aggressive player, actually. He's getting over 5 tackles and interceptions per 90 and per match, and he's in the top 2 percentile of any of the fullbacks in Liga when it comes to these metrics of getting tackles as well as interceptions per 90. And he's actually, I think, the fullback who's made the most challenges per 90 against his opponent compared to any other fullback as well as Liga. So you can really get a trend here that he is a very aggressive player from at least what I can tell. And he also gets a lot of challenges very high up the pitch as well. He's very high ranking in those stats too when it comes to getting challenges high up the pitch in the attacking third, but also in the middle third of the pitch as well. And he's in the top 5% for ball recovery. So he does have a decent awareness of, where the ball might go, and also has that, I think, bravery to win those 50-50s, to, get his foot on the ball so that it doesn't lead to a dangerous counterattack or something like that. So I do like that about him. You can tell that he's aggressive. On the negative side of things, though, you can tell that he commits a lot of fouls, actually. He's in the bottom percentile when it comes to that, when it comes to making fouls per match. I think that's another sign that he's an aggressive player, but maybe lacks a bit of composure, maybe concentration when it comes to it, because we don't want to be giving away useless free kicks. And also, too, he's in the most per 90 when it comes to, I think these one-on-one kind of metrics when you look at percentage of dribblers tackled, right? So he's getting a lot of challenges in, but he's not actually making all of them. He's actually getting beat a lot in these 1v1s. runs. And he's also pretty low ranking or high ranking, whatever you want to say it. It's just not really good. He poorly ranks when it comes to making defensive errors as well. Those metrics from what I can see. And I don't watch too much of him in Liga, like I said earlier. So I don't want to panic too much about this. But maybe what you can tell is that he's, willing to put his foot in. He's willing to make a challenge, but perhaps a bit erratic as well. Anybody who's watched a bit more of him, do let me know. And he's also not very tall. He's only, I think, 1.76 meters tall, I think, as well. So he's not going to be winning a ton of aerial duels either. And that really also shows in the stats too. Now, if you're going to look at some of his more creative numbers, his more kind of attacking focused numbers, not a lot out there really jumped off the page for me. I think there was some, stats from maybe previous seasons where he looked slightly better in some of these metrics, but from his most recent season, where I think he did have two different managers, I'm not mistaken. He had Philippe Clement, who's now over at Rangers, who's a very good manager, I will add. And I think Adi Hütter came in, who's a former Eintracht Frankfurt manager, and they've had a good season, Monaco. I think both this last season, that we just had, and then the previous season to that one, they've been playing quite well. But for some reason, he's kind of attacking metrics don't really jump out to me too much, or at least he's not ranking in the highest of percentiles really in any of them, should I say. And what was really concerning to me, and again, I'm taking it with a grain of salt here, and so that's why I'm not being that negative about it here. I'm just kind of being honest that none of it really jumps out here, and don't really get too panicked by all the red. But what I would say, maybe one of them to, if you wanted to panic, if you're that sort of person, would be that his pass completion percentage wasn't really too great, and it doesn't rank too great for fullbacks in general of just Ligue 1. We're just comparing him to just Ligue 1 fullbacks, not even to Premier League or any other leagues as well. Just in Ligue 1, he ranked in the bottom 20th percentile or the top 80th percentile, however you want to look at it mathematically or statistically. But that really isn't good when it comes to pass completion percentage, and we don't want to be a team or have a player at right back who's giving it away unnecessarily or doesn't know how to retain possession and be smart with it. And so either that means the 74% pass percentage, that either he's attempting too audacious of passes, like way too often, or he can perhaps be a bit sloppy with some of these passes that he's trying to play as well. You can explain it by the fact that maybe he's more creatively responsible in the team too, right? So I'm not going to try to dig too deep into it and tear him apart with some of these, because it can be the case that if he's expected to be very daring on the ball, if he's expected to be one of the chief creators in the team, then his passing percentage isn't going to be so great compared to, other fullbacks in Liga who are like a Matt Doherty or like an Aurier or someone who just love to just pass sideways kind of instead of making, that, audacious pass, which he seems to try to make. But yeah, what's very interesting too, though, is that he ranked pretty well when it came to switches of play for fullbacks, and that's something I'll continue to highlight on because that's something I saw personally when I watched his game, and it actually reflected a little bit in the stats as well, that he actually has a pretty good switch of play on him, and he does it often. Now, we can tell that he's, again, a very aggressive player. It's either from his own characteristics, from his own play style, or it's, also part of the instructions of the managers that want to get the best out of him when it comes to that sort of defending style, I guess, defending high up the pitch. But yeah, you can tell that he's a very aggressive player. He's getting in more tackles and interceptions than even Pedro Porro is. He's challenging more opponents than than Pedro Porro is. But where you again get slightly concerned is some of the numbers with, the challenges lost. It's kind of interesting that Pedro isn't, too crazy off him. Like, it's not like he's still getting beat 1.5 times, per match there. But, Vanderson is, behind him there. More ball recoveries, which is good to see. But what is also an area of concern, you could say, is the poor aerial win percentage for Vanderson, because I'm pretty sure they're similar height, him and Pedro Porro. At least Pedro Porro isn't that tall. And the fact that he's winning 51% of his aerials compared to Vanderson is concerning. I would say, and I would add, just for context, that Vanderson actually had more aerial challenges to deal with this last season, despite playing fewer games than Pedro Porro. So you could also say that maybe there were more opportunities to mess up or more opportunities to lose them. So still something I would point out, but also I'm not going to get too crazy about. Shot creating actions, they're definitely different there. He's a more creative player, Pedro Porro. And what I would add too is that it's going to be hard to be better than Pedro Porro forward, at least in a statistical sense, and also in general, just because he's a terrific player, Pedro Porro, going forward, but also because of the style of play that we have, the system system that we have is so attacking focused that that's going to make it also hard to beat him in some of these metrics, I think, when you're looking at kind of some of the creative numbers of going forward. But he is quite close to him in certain areas. Like when you look at the pass completion percentage, I think that's an interesting cue there, because I was kind of digging into to Vanderson earlier with it, right? But the fact that Pedro Porro, who we know is, a very creative player and is a very technically gifted player, their pass completion percentage isn't that far off from each other. So again, I'm going to lean on the positive side of things and suggest, or guess at least, that maybe Vanderson is more daring on the ball than other fullbacks that we normally come across or that we normally watch and on a regular basis. And that might then show in the stats for fullbacks that are much more comfortable just passing it sideways, giving it off to someone else. Maybe this guy is, like Pedro Porro, he really tries things, and that then can be reflected with, poor pass completion percentage, because they're not all going to work out. And again, the switches of play coming out once too. I think Pedro Porro is a very capable player of putting on a good switch of play, but Vanderson is ahead of him there. More successful take-ons, which I also find interesting. It's not that high of a number of successful take-ons per match, but still a good sign there. And he's having more carries into the penalty area, similar progressive carries. And from what I could tell when watching some of his highlights and from, seeing him in general, I do think he's not a bad ball carrier, in that he has a bit of flair to his game. His first touch can be quite good. He tries things. He does, look to try to beat his man with some different array of moves. And he likes to go at his players, I think, with a type of first touch, at least in some of the highlight packages I could see. He goes for kind of an audacious sort of first touch in a lot of cases to try to instantly get past his man. And we see Pedro Porro actually go for the same thing, because he's not the quickest of players where he's like a Jed Spence or somebody where they're just going to take a couple of touches of the ball, then just burn past you afterwards. They're actually going to get you with maybe a quicker move of like a first touch flick or something like that to get past their man, instead of just using, kind of their raw pace or their raw physicality. They actually have to be a bit more creative than maybe other players do. So that's something to think about as well. So, from what I can tell, Vanderson seems to be a very technical player who likes to try to create things instead of being safe, and like other fullbacks that I've watched in the past, he can spray a pass. He likes to do it with both feet. He likes to come into midfield, which is very important. And he actually has some decent finishes. If you look back at some of his goals, the one with his left foot, the kind of like 180, where he just all of a sudden is able to turn in one motion with the ball not even, kind of the ball behind him, and hits it with his left, is a great finish. And he has some decent ones with his right as well. He's got a bit of flair to his game, like I said earlier, with some of his first touches and first time passes. He just tries to go for a lot of flicks and tricks on occasion, and he does know how to manipulate the ball quite well. And he looks to be a very aggressive defender, which is a good attribute to have when coming to the Premier League, not afraid to put a foot in by the looks of things. But I do feel like there is a slight maybe worry about the fact that some of his defensive numbers seem to reflect that he's not the best maybe in one-on-one moments, or at least he'll either win the challenge or miss it. There's no in between. He might not hold up the defender, wait for others to catch up with him. He often will lose challenges, at least statistically. That's what it looks to be the case. And also, he's not very tall, so his aerial game is not going to be very good either, where it looks like he's losing a lot of aerial battles just in general. But I'm not going to dig too deep into that, because I'm not going to claim to be a total expert on the guy. I actually had to do a lot of research this last night in order to kind of update myself on who he is, and kind of give a better picture of what he could be for you guys, at least, who maybe don't want to go through this kind of cramming and research. So again, if you could smash that like button for me, would be a great help. And to kind of go into my conclusion here, I would say I don't know too much about him going in, but I was impressed by some of the highlights, and I didn't really think much of him when I watched him in those European games. But then when we were connected with him, I did have to kind of sort of cast my mind back and think of what did I like about him, or what at least stood out. And I would say that he had that decent passing range that I can remember. He liked that switch of play, and you feel like then that sort of makes sense of the mold that we're going for. We're going for someone who's maybe similar to a Pedro Porro, who's technically good on the ball, can step into midfield comfortably, and that would make a lot of sense. If you wanted someone very different to that, who could offer something different to Pedro, I'm not sure if this is the guy. He looks to be kind of similar to him. Some question marks for me defensively. I'll bring that up again just in terms of the 1v1 numbers, but I'm not going to dig too deep into it. And I'll finish off with this. If you didn't watch my last video, by the way, I did actually talk about right back options that Spurs could, be taking a look at, slash ones that I would guess that Spurs would be taking a look at. And there are two other Liga fullbacks that really stood out to me actually when digging deep into some of the numbers. And Guela Due, a guy out in Stade Rennes, seems to be a very talented right back, very young as well. And then also a very young one is plays for Lille for Fonseca, Thiago Santos. Those were two guys that actually were some of my favorite when doing the research in that last video that I done about the fullbacks that could potentially replace Emerson Royale. So that's also something that maybe if you wanted to look at after this video. But stay tuned for any more content that will come out this weekend. Please do become a member if you want to support the channel any further. And there might be a fan show this Monday. It should be going on this Monday, by the way, just as a reminder, all the fan show members. But I'll leave you there, everybody. Come on, you Spurs. Smash that like button if you can one more time. And then maybe one day, if it is going to progress further, we'll be thinking about Vanderson coming to Tottenham. I'll see you later, everybody.